Hello and welcome to The Menu, Monocle Radio's food and drink programme. I'm your host, Chiara Rimella. Coming up, we sit down with one of the world's most celebrated bakers to find out about the true joy of making the perfect loaf.
You could go to the fanciest restaurant in the world and you could probably compare that to a piece of fresh bread with butter on it as a similar experience.
Also on the programme, Alistair McQueen samples a fragrant brew at a long-established French tea house.
It's more about the art French of tea, which is the art of offering tea, the art of welcoming, the art of designing object of the tea. So it's not just about the tea, it's what there is before and what there is after.
All that here on The Menu on Monocle Radio. Bread might be the cornerstone of global cuisine, and it is, by definition, one of the most democratic foods, but much as it is omnipresent, it is famously not easy to perfect. A recent rise in interest for crunchy sourdough has led plenty of people to try their hand at the skill, with many taking a very scientific, controlled approach. But the true masters in the field are often those for whom dough is almost second nature and who follow instinct and tactile expertise as much as they do scales, numbers and recipes. British-born Richard Hart started out working in high-end kitchens, but it's only after discovering the art of baking bread that he found his true calling. He went on to become one of the most influential bakers in the world, first at the helm of Tartine in San Francisco, and then founding his own venture in Copenhagen, Hart Bakery, with the backing of the city's pioneering chef, René Redzepi. Now he's written a book. Appropriately called Richard Hart Bread, the volume aims to transmit all the knowledge he's accumulated along the years, as well as gathering recipes that he has developed with his tight-knit team. Earlier, I sat down with Richard in the studio and started by asking him how intuitive bread making truly is.
I've been baking professionally for a long time and a lot of bread books just bore the hell out of me. They send me crazy. I just can't read them. So like this, I just wanted to approach it like we're sitting in the room together. You're standing next to me and I'm telling you how to do it. When it comes to intuition, baking bread is very much that. You know, like it kind of goes all the way... It goes back thousands of years before there were scales, before we even understood what we were doing, you know, like it goes back so far. And the intuition is like you're standing in a room. Is your room warm or is it cold? How does it feel? How do you feel? Because if it's baking hot, your yeast is probably baking hot, your sourdough culture, so you want to cool it down a little bit. And then the same the other way round. Like it's really teaching you to read your environment and pay attention to your flowers and stuff without like going into like the numbers and all the crazy stuff. There is some of that in there, you know, like it's not dumbed down at all, but like it's just, I would say it's more approachable.
It's funny that because when I think about the way that my grandmother used to tell us how to do her recipes, you know, you'd be like, okay, so how do you make the meatballs or whatever? And she'd be like, well, you just do them until they're ready. You're like, okay. It's like, how do you know they're ready? And she'd just go like, well, you know. So my question to you is, how do you actually impart this knowledge of intuition? Because ultimately you have written a whole book and there has to be some level of instruction and you have a team that you've taught all this stuff, but either they're there with you looking at your hands as you're doing something, or how do you actually transmit this intuition to others?
So, you know, I can only give you so much. I can hold your hand so far. But like the truth is, if you're a complete novice and you've never baked a loaf of bread in your life and you want to begin the journey, which a lot of us did throughout the last 5 years or whatever, you're going to kind of learn how to play an instrument here, you know, like it's like playing a guitar. I can't play a guitar. I wish I could, you know, but I don't quite have the moment to dedicate to it. And it's kind of the same. You're going to get into an intimate relationship here with the sourdough culture and whatever, and in that intimate relationship you're going to learn each other, and doing that day in, day out, or week in, week out, you will start forming a bond. And I've given you enough tools that can lead you there, but I'm not going to take you there. So like I mean, if you want me to take you there, you have to come and work for me, you know, in the bakery. But...
Do you have room? I did actually...
In Mexico, for sure.
I was going to say, I did visit the website of Hart Bakery earlier, and you do have a kind of careers page. So
Yeah, and you know, I have Hart Bakery in Copenhagen, but right now I'm opening a bakery in Mexico City, and it will be open in the next couple of months before coming here to London. In Mexico City, we're opening a bakery called Green Rhino, and it was named by my 11-year-old son. It's a bit of a weird name for a bakery, isn't it? And like he was like, Dad, call it Green Rhino. And I said, all right, yeah, of course.
It's kind of genius. I love it.
Brilliant name, yeah. I have a tattoo on my arm here, and it's kind of a dodgy tattoo that he drew when he was 6 or something. He's now 11, and he's always loved Green Rhino. So it's a perfect name, actually. And he's very proud about the name. So, yeah, of course I have room for staff. I want to teach people how to be bakers. I want to teach people how to be the best bakers, you know? It's like, that would be my dream in life, to make everyone amazing. And then I can, like, hang up my apron and, like, go to the country somewhere.
Well, I want to take this in so many kind of spin-off directions, but I'll start with the team, because I feel like there are so many people in this book, actually, you know, and you name them quite accurately. Yeah. But also you say that the whole point of working in a bakery or working in a kitchen was about having this sort of sense of working in a band. Yeah. And I did want to ask you this, because also when you go through a day in your life, at the beginning of the day is very solitary, actually. Yeah, it's this, you know, punishing 3 a.m. start on the bike by yourself. So I feel like a lot of us, when we think about professional bakers, imagine this very solitary figure through the night. Yeah. So where does that balance lie for you between the kind of the quiet and the peace of the solitary nature of the job versus the importance of having all these mates around you?
Very good question. Like, very good. You are so pro. The baking shift, which is the shitty part of baking. You know, you get up in the middle of the night, it's not amazing. Although the baking part itself is amazing, no one wants to wake up at that time of day. That sucks, you know? So basically, you get to work, especially if you're in Copenhagen, the weather's generally terrible. You've probably got soaking wet on the way there. You get there, it's freezing cold. You're standing by the oven, so you're back to being warm again, and you start baking beautiful bread. So it becomes amazing. And that solitary start is really because you don't need everyone waking up in the middle of the night to come to work at that time. You just need 1 or 2 people. So you get to work, you start baking. Turns out to be really lovely experience. You know, you get there, you see the dawn. So like there's parts that are bad and there's parts that are amazing. You start baking and generally, hopefully the bread's beautiful, which makes you very happy. And then the team start rolling in a couple of hours later to start the day's production for the next day. I think growing a team is really important, and my team means so much to me. Like they're everything, you know, like everyone talks about, oh my God, the customer. Actually, I don't believe in that. I believe in the staff. The staff. I put my staff forward first. If it comes to like Christmas time and we're running low on bread, I'll make sure all my staff have the bread they need for their family, even if I run out and I don't have enough to sell to my customer, because they mean so much to me. They're the ones, you know, they're the ones that make it tick and make it worthwhile. The reason they're in the book like this is because this is not just mine. This is not just my book. This book and these recipes have come from other people, and I want to celebrate them and thank them for it.
But I think with bread, there's so much history involved. There's so much tradition involved that can you really talk about inventiveness as being part of like a single person's approach into creating something new? Can you really create something new in bread? Because there's an awful lot of recipes in this book, but is any of it something that you feel like I invented this, or how is inventiveness possible in the world of bread baking? Yeah,
it's another good question. Like I think like bread has been, I don't know about creating something new. Like people have been throwing different things in dough for years, for centuries, you know, like people who had leftover porridge oats in the morning, they put it in their bread. I helped to write Tartine's book 3, and we made porridge breads, and it felt like, I don't know, did we make it cool again or something? Maybe, but we didn't invent that. People have been doing that for centuries. We just took that idea and maybe ran with it slightly more and tried to find other grains that we could do the same techniques with and other things. So, and I think the same with this book. Like there's other things here. Maybe there's a couple of things where before baking I worked as a chef for 12 years, and I learned to, like, as a chef you kind of pull things apart and put them back together. So there's a bread in here, and I used to get teased by one of my baker friends because, like, he essentially said that I used to make only white bread, and he was kind of a hippie baker that wanted to make whole wheat bread. So after a while, I wanted to challenge him, you know, and be like, okay, I'm actually going to make a whole wheat bread that's more whole wheat than plain whole wheat. So there's a bread in here where I take the components of a whole wheat, which is bran and germ. They've come out of the bread. I kind of toast them heavily, soak them, make a water from that and add that back into the dough, and then add all that back into the dough. And I guess I call it a whole wheat as F bread in the book. And it was to really tease him and say, actually, I'm making a much more whole wheat bread than you. So in a way, I try to be creative and think outside the box. But like you said, bread's been done for centuries. So like, who's to say that the guy next door hasn't done it?
Well, you're obviously quite perceptively still very passionate about it, but there's a line in the book that I love, which is your mother saying when you go from being a chef to deciding to become a baker, it's like, you're going to get bored. It's the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Do you get bored? Can you get bored?
No, like, I have never been so challenged in my life. Like, I wake up every day so excited to get to work, hoping that I've made this perfect loaf of bread. Like, I mean, I make bread all the time, my whole life. I'm obsessed. My head's in the mixer making dough. I'm not the head baker that just comes in and leaves. Like, I am literally mixing dough every day, and I'm so obsessed with it because I love it, and it's so challenging and exciting. And I think I make perfect bread once or twice a year. And, you know, that time I run around, look at this bread, it's perfect. Oh, my God. And, you know, I hope that I do that every day. And, you know, I don't. I never do. I rarely do. Sometimes I make good bread and sometimes I make bad bread, you know, like the rest of us.
Oh, my God, you heard it here. No, but I find it interesting that you still get nervous that maybe the bread's not going to be very good. Like, you're obviously, you know, up there when it comes to, you know, I would feel like you'd have some degree of self-confidence at this point. Yeah. But you can make bad bread. And also, I suppose it's a bit of an impossible question, but when is the bread perfect? What does it look like when it comes out the oven?
I think the planets were in alignment, actually. I think there was something going on with the universe and your sourdough and the flour and the way you did it. And the world was perfect that day in that moment. You know, like, there's so many little factors that go into, from the moment you put flour and water together, every single thing you do will affect the final loaf. And it could be minuscule. It could be you did it 10 minutes later or 2 minutes later, or there's so many little factors. And what I would call a perfect loaf, I guess, is like, it has risen in volume 4 times the amount. It's so crunchy and crisp, and the inside is so custardy and airy, and the flavour will keep on giving you more and more as you chew on it. You know, like, I believe that if you eat a piece of bread, you should chew it, and it will keep giving you more and more taste as you bite through the crust and crumb, and it's not just flat. So, I mean, you know what? Next time I get it, maybe I'll send you a picture and be like, oh, my God, see, this is the perfect loaf.
Well, what about location, I suppose, geographically? Because obviously in the book, you take us through your career. And so you've spent an awful lot of time in California and then quite obviously in Denmark, now in Mexico.
Yeah.
So what about, you know, how the bread changes in all these locations? Obviously there is your specialty and your defining passion, but also there's such different bread cultures in these places. And to be fair to you, you do open with a section on rye, so it's a clear homage to kind of the Danish tradition.
This is really good question too, because like, I moved to Denmark, and I was saying to someone today actually this morning, like, what, as an English person or an American, I lived in both for quite a long time, and that's where I became a baker. If you talk about bread, the first thing of bread in our head is a white sliced loaf of bread, or a white loaf of bread, wheat bread. If you move to Denmark and you're in Denmark and you start talking to them about bread, the only thing in their head is rye bread, a dense, thick, heavy loaf of bread. And, you know, I've only ever considered that as rye bread. I've never considered it as bread, you know, like, so it's really interesting to, you know, like, leaving America and moving to Copenhagen really opened my eyes in the fact that I think if you're opening a bakery somewhere, you should be of place. You know, like, what do people have an emotional connection to? What did they grow up eating? What did they like? Oh, my grandma used to feed me this when I was a little kid. You know, you have these memories that take you somewhere, and like, when I moved to Denmark, my opening menu was quite American. We had, because I'd come from America, we had a lot of savoury Danish pastries, ham and cheese and things like that. And the Danes were like, what the hell is this? You know, like they didn't have, it's supposed to be sweet. What is he feeding us? And I quickly learned that, like, this doesn't work here. You know, like I need to be of place. And moving to Mexico is the same idea. I want to open something that's of place where people were like, oh my God, I used to eat this when I was a kid. But, you know, just use that as your canvas and then try and make the best version. So I hinted earlier, but I'm doing a bakery with Claridge's this summer in London, and I'm going to open a British bakery. And like, I have like this idea of everything I ate as a kid. I'm going to go through all this repertoire of like iced fingers and Belgian buns and custard tarts. And, you know, I'm not making a croissant or a pan of chocolate because I didn't eat that as a kid, you know, like I did when we went to France actually, but I feel like the bakery world's a little bit homogenised at the moment, and I would like to make something very much of place.
Well, you talked earlier about this idea of intimacy, of having to get intimate with the bread. But I do think that, again, like it's something that you do mention in the book, that there is this ancient ancestral relationship with bread. Bread itself is just like this very kind of totemic, you know, food item in so many respects. It really is like at the heart of what makes us humans. But then at the same time, it's so inherently linked with your memories of childhood as well, because all these baked goods, sweet stuff particularly, it's just impossible for it not to hark back to your sense of identity. So I'm interested in that because in the book, again, you say, you know, it took me getting to Selfridges to sort of fall in love with making food. But what was your experience of loving bread before that, and at what point did it kind of become part of your identity?
So I don't have a lot. My grandma was not lived from Italy, and we didn't go on family vac. You know, like I didn't come from a beautiful food background. I didn't become a cook until I was in my late teens, and then I started understanding food. And, you know, I started at Selfridges as a chef with zero knowledge of food. I didn't know what basil was, you know, I didn't know anything. I was beginning from zero, and it took me, you know, I deep dived into the food world and became, I guess, obsessed with that. When I moved to America, in the States, I was a chef, and in America, we work 4 days a week, 10-hour shifts, because after that, there's laws in California that they have to pay you time and a half. So I felt like I had all this spare time on my hands all of a sudden. And so I decided that I wanted to learn to make bread. Like that was the one skill that I didn't have. And I went to a bakery, which was in the town where I lived, and on the advice of the pastry chef from the restaurant. And she said, well, they used to make bread for the French Laundry. And I'd heard of the French Laundry, obviously, you know. I'm like, okay, well, this must be the most amazing bread. But I'd never been in a bakery because back in like 2000s, there wasn't many bakeries. It hadn't really kicked off the bakery movement yet. And here in England, there was supermarket bread or like big chain bakeries. So I hadn't really been to a bakery. I didn't really know what to expect. I stumbled across this bakery. The owner invited me to her ranch, which I was really confused about, you know, what do you mean come to the ranch, you know, like, and she's like, come to the ranch. True
Californian style.
Yeah, so I go to the ranch, you know, my first ranch I've ever been on, I guess, and like, I walk on, it's a huge farm with chickens and sheep and vegetables growing everywhere. It was beautiful and ideal, blue skies. And there was this barn with these 2 wood-fired ovens, and they were baking everything loaded with these huge long peels. It felt like they were baking 1,000 years ago. Like I couldn't help but instantly fall in love with it. It was from the furthest. I didn't imagine that to be the case. I didn't think people made bread like that still, you know. It felt like any moment in history, and I was in love instantly. And then from then on I was very obsessed and like reading every book I could. And the owner, she was 65, and she saw that, and she was also the same, and she was feeding me bread books and knowledge and everything. We used to have lots of fun conversations. Really, I remember I have a bread history a bit, but like as a kid I remember going to the grocery store and just having a warm loaf of bread, you know, like I remember that as like, oh my God, it's a warm loaf of bread. I think like we all get that feeling of like, oh my God, it's warm bread. I don't know what it is. And, you know, you could go to the fanciest restaurant in the world and you could probably compare that to a piece of fresh bread with butter on it. as a similar experience. You know, like they're both amazing. Like they're not one's more than the other, really. And that's crazy because this is a simple loaf of bread with butter, and then this is the most fine dining restaurant you've ever been to in your life. But the feeling you get from eating them is a high.
That was Richard Hart speaking to me in the studio at Midori House. This is The Menu. Now it's time for the week's top food and drink headlines. Here is Monocle's Maisie Ringer.
Luxury fashion house Yves Saint Laurent has unveiled a sushi restaurant at its flagship store in Paris. Located in the store's basement, this new dining experience is a branch of Sushi Park, the West Hollywood hotspot favoured by A-listers like Beyoncé and Taylor Swift. Priced at around €260 per person, the restaurant reflects a growing trend among high-end fashion houses, including Dior, Armani and Louis Vuitton, who are branching out from haute couture to haute cuisine by launching exclusive gourmet restaurants within their boutiques. Mingles has become Korea's only 3-star Michelin restaurant, a prestigious award from the Michelin Guide that underscores the country's growing culinary influence. The 2025 Seoul and Busan Guide features 40 Michelin-starred establishments, with 37 in Seoul and 3 in Busan, further solidifying both cities as major gastronomic destinations. France has triumphed over Switzerland in the world's largest ever fondue contest. Organisers of the grand event crafted a fondue weighing over 2,100 kilograms, surpassing the previous record set in La Chaux de Fonds in 2009. Originally planned to weigh 2,039 kilograms, the fondue exceeded expectations and was enjoyed by 5,000 people just a few kilometres from the Swiss border. Those are the week's food and drink headlines. Now back to Chiara.
Thanks, Maisie. You're listening to The Menu. Next, we're in London, where a time-honoured French tea brand has set up shop in the central neighbourhood of Covent Garden. The expansive space, sprawling across 4 floors, is home to a huge variety of different teas, hailing anywhere from Japan to Malawi. Alistair McQueen went along to explore the content of the many tea caddies on display, as well as tasting some of their fragrant contents, and had a go at making an unsurpassable brew. He brings us this report.
As ubiquitous as it may be, there can be no doubt that tea is an extremely multifaceted affair. There are a myriad of varieties sourced from an array of countries, and tea leaves of different fragrances and tastes. What we know in the modern world is the straightforward process of pouring boiling water into a cup and sometimes adding in a sliver of milk. But plenty of enthusiasts are now leaning into the numerous brewing myths and techniques, turning the process into an exalted affair, hewn with muslin cotton filter and rare flavours. The French gourmet tea company Mariage Frères was founded in Paris in 1854 and has since become a byword for premium quality Camellia sinensis and sources its leaves from 80 select gardens in more than 40 countries. At the company's Georgian townhouse location in London's Covent Garden, visitors can take a break from the melee outside and step into a veritable tea emporium brimming with a tranquil Parisian salon atmosphere. This is where tea connoisseurs and infusion aficionados are regularly invited to learn about the fundamentals of brewing, preparation advice, and some serving savoir-faire at its tea masterclass, held by the shop's food and beverage manager, Mohamed Houala. Before Houala shows us the tea masterclass, I asked him what he thinks it is about the drink that holds a special place in lives across the world.
This is the best thing with tea because it's linked to the smell, so which is a very strong memory. And every time you smell it or you drink a tea, you close your eyes and you are somewhere in vacation or somewhere around the world. And this is the best thing that I like.
The masterclass takes place upstairs in the Musée de Tea, which is replete with historic oak tea chests, pewter caddies, and other artefacts and curiosities related to the drink. Houala takes his position and stands behind an elegant wood counter, arranging his silver-plated caddy spoons, cotton filters, and the Art Deco 1930s isotherm stoneware teapot.
One of the speciality of the French art of tea is to control the infusion. We want every customer to have the perfect infusion. So we're going to go through the ceremony of French of tea. So very important, the first thing to do is to warm up the teapot. Very often we have customers forgetting this step, which is very important because tea needs to infuse in 95 degrees water, depend of the tea. But this tea we're going to do now, the Marco Polo Rhapsody, which is a white tea. Has to be infused in 90 degrees hot water. So we're using a filter, which is 100% cotton. So as you can see, I have to warm up very carefully the teapot. Then we take a canister, tea canister, put 20 centiliters of water. So I'm going to put 3 spoons of tea.
Amid all the activity, canisters and diverting couture condiments, it's easy to forget the essentials of brewing tea in a Mariage Frères fashion.
You need a teapot, of course. This one is, I would say, a bit less than a liter. We are using the teapot called Art Deco. It's inspired 1930s. We use those teapots since the first beginning. It's also it comes with a globe, which keep it warm for more than an hour. So they need a teapot. They need a clean filter because we need to be careful of on the flavor that stays in the filter. So as I did now, I took a very new filter. They need as well good quality water. This is very important. Very good quality water. So I think at home it's easier just to filter the water, to use normal filter. But the best one would be to take a mineral water to infuse the tea. That would be the best one. And to have also something to measure the temperature. Yeah, that's very important because just putting the water on the pan and waiting for it to bubble is not the right technique, because you need to know that when the water is bubbling, it means that it's almost already 100 degrees, which is too hot for the tea, which brings us to the bitterness.
Before Huala brews the tea, he warms the pot itself by pouring hot water into the vessel. Then, inserting the filter filled with the leaves into the pot, he carefully pours over the water with the advice that we should wait 3 minutes before serving.
So this is a white tea. So the white tea can go through at least 5 minutes, depending on the quantity, of course. But for this tea, we're gonna go to 3 minutes because I put the right quantity of tea. So we're gonna try to not go through more than 3 minutes, because usually we have very often this things for customers. They tell us, I don't like green tea because it's too bitter, for example. But tea is not bitter. If your tea is bitter, it's because it has been over-infused. That's the only reason. Bitter tea doesn't exist. We have tea astringents which stay longer in mouth. This is a good quality for tea. But a bitter tea, it's just the way it has been done. So by controlling the infusion, we are avoiding the bitterness. So after the 3 minutes, I'm going to remove the leaves and give you the perfect infusion.
The point of these masterclasses, Huala explains, is that they are about the discovery of tea for some and the rediscovery of it for those who have never tried varieties from, say, certain Japanese gardens or leaves. The example he's using today is the new Thé de Cygne, a collection dedicated to the Chinese zodiac. Huala tells me more.
The terroir is very important for all our teas. We need to think about teas as all our teas come from the same tree, which is called the Camellia sinensis. It's one tree, and from that tree, depending on what we're going to do after, it's going to become a green tea, a black tea, a blue tea. But all the teas come from the same tree. This is the magic of the teas, what we're going to do after. And the same tree, but depending on where is the tree in the world, so the terroir will change the flavor of the tree, of course. But for this one, for the Serpent de Cygne, it's a Chinese green tea. But what we like to communicate about this tea is the flavor inside, so more the goji berry.
After a tasting complemented by exquisite matcha tea cakes, delicate cannoli, and Moorish tea jellies, I want to know what makes a cup of tea at Mariage Frères here so different from anywhere else?
It's more about the art French of tea. Which is the art of offering tea, the art of welcoming, the art of designing object of the tea. Everything has been created around the tea. As you can see now, we have those cast iron tea leaves in which we put our glasses. So it's not just about the tea, it's what days before and what days after.
For Monocle, in London, I'm a teetotal Alistair McQueen.
Thanks, Alistair. And that's all for this edition of The Menu. Remember that we are back with a new episode again on Friday at 2000 London time. That's at midday in San Francisco. Also, don't forget to tune into our spin-off show Food Neighborhoods for a tour of some of the world's tastiest destinations. I am Chiara Rimella. This programme was produced by Monica Lillis and our sound engineer was Flynn Simons. Thanks for listening, and until next week.